My family served me divorce papers at Grandma's funeral, then the executor opened a red envelope. Before you leave, Evelyn, Daniel needs your signature. My mother-in-law's voice cut across the final notes of the funeral hymn. Grandma Rose's coffin had not yet been lowered into the ground, turned from the grave and saw Celeste Whitmore standing beneath a black umbrella, holding a thick cream-colored envelope. Beside her stood my husband, Daniel, his face carefully arranged into an expression of grief. Behind him was Sophie Lane. Daniel's communications director, his mistress. She wore a fitted black dress that made no attempt to hide the curve of her stomach. Around her throat rested Grandma Rose's antique ruby necklace, the one Rose had promised would stay in the family until she personally decided who deserved it. And my pulse seemed to stop. Celeste pushed the envelope into my hands. Across the front, in clean black letters, were the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage, you're serving me divorce papers?" I whispered. Daniel glanced toward the mourners gathered around us. "Please don't make a scene." "At your grandmother's funeral? I wanted this handled privately." I looked at Sophie's belly. She placed one protective hand over it. Daniel followed my gaze and exhaled impatiently. "Sophie's pregnant." The world tilted, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of watching me fall. "How far along?" Sophie smiled with false sadness. "Almost 4 months." 4 months. Daniel had still been sleeping beside me 4 months ago. He had still been kissing my forehead before work, telling me we were tired because the company restructuring had taken everything out of us, had still been calling me his wife. Celeste lowered her voice. "There's a settlement agreement inside. It's generous, considering you brought no Whitmore money into this marriage." That sentence hurt almost as much as the affair. Had brought no family money, had only spent 8 years rescuing Whitmore Hospitality from bankruptcy. Before I could answer, Julian Cross, Grandma Rose's executor, stepped away from the graveside. Was a silver-haired attorney who had represented Rose for more than 30 years. In his hand was a small red envelope sealed with dark wax. "Mr. Whitmore," Julian said to Daniel, "have divorce papers been formally presented to your wife?" Daniel frowned. "What does that have to do with the funeral?" "Answer the question." Celeste's expression changed only slightly, but I saw it. Fear. Daniel squared his shoulders. "Yes. The process server delivered copies to the house this morning. These are the courtesy copies." Julian looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore, did you sign anything?" "No good." Celeste stepped forward. "Julian, whatever Rose instructed you to do can wait until after the burial." "No," he said. "It cannot." He held up the red envelope. Rose's instructions were explicit. If Daniel attempted to end his marriage before the estate was settled, I was to open this immediately, in the presence of the family. Even the wind seemed to die. Julian broke the wax seal. Inside were 3 folded pages and a small brass key. He read the first line silently, then he looked at Daniel with something close to disgust. "What does it say?" Daniel demanded. Julian unfolded the document. "Effective immediately, all voting rights attached to Rose Whitmore's shares in Whitmore Hospitality are transferred to Evelyn Carter Whitmore, pending completion of a forensic audit." Gasps moved through the mourners. Daniel went pale. Celeste grabbed his arm. Julian continued. "All distributions to Daniel Whitmore, Celeste Whitmore, or any future descendant claimed through Daniel Whitmore are suspended until the audit is complete and any claim of biological descent has been independently verified." Sophie's hand fell from her belly. Julian turned the final page. "There is one additional instruction." He looked directly at me. "Evelyn is to be given the key to Rose's private archive. No other family member is permitted to enter." He placed the brass key in my palm. Daniel stared at it. "What archive?" Julian's expression hardened. "The one your grandmother built because she knew someone in this family was stealing from her." And for the first time that day, Daniel stopped pretending to grieve. The burial continued, but no one heard the minister's final prayer. Daniel's cousins whispered beneath their umbrellas. Board members stared at me as though I had transformed from a discarded wife into an armed threat. Sophie slipped away first. She moved quickly for a woman who was supposedly 4 months pregnant. Noticed everything now. The red envelope remained in Julian's hand, but the brass key felt heavy in mine. Daniel waited until the mourners began walking toward their cars. Then he caught my elbow. "You need to refuse the appointment." I looked at his fingers on my coat. Take your hand off me. We can discuss the marriage later. The company is separate. You made our marriage part of the company when you served me papers before your grandmother was buried. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what controlling those shares means. I was chief financial officer for 6 years. I understand perfectly. You resigned. I stepped down because you said our marriage couldn't survive with both of us working 80-hour weeks. That was different. Yes. You needed me outside the building so Sophie could move into my office. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. You're emotional. My husband introduced his pregnant mistress at his grandmother's funeral. Emotion is a reasonable response. She isn't my mistress. I stared at him. He closed his eyes briefly. Not anymore. We're together. Thank you for clarifying the exact date on which adultery becomes romance. Celeste approached, her face rigid. You will return the necklace. She was speaking to me, but her eyes kept tracking Sophie's retreating figure. I'm not wearing it. Celeste turned. Sophie had reached a black SUV near the cemetery gates. The ruby necklace flashed at her throat. That necklace belongs to the estate, Celeste hissed. Apparently Sophie believes she's already inherited it, I said. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Grandmother gave it to her. No, she didn't. He looked at me sharply. The night before Rose died, I had been sitting beside her hospital bed when she reached for my hand. Her voice had been weak, but her mind remained clear. People steal small things first, she had told me. That's how they practice for the larger theft. At the time, I thought she meant the missing ruby necklace. Now I wasn't so sure. Julian stopped beside us. The archive is located at Rosewood House. Celeste's face lost its color. Rosewood House was Grandma Rose's private residence overlooking the Hudson River. The family used it for holidays, but Rose kept one wing locked. You're giving her access today? Celeste asked. I'm following my client's instructions. Daniel stepped closer. That house is family property. Not anymore, Julian replied. Rose left it to Evelyn. Silence. Then Daniel laughed once. It was a brittle, ugly sound. A grandmother was drugged. She didn't know what she was signing. Julian's gaze turned cold. Rose recorded every estate meeting during the last 18 months. If you wish to challenge her competency, those recordings will be played in open court. Daniel's laugh disappeared. Julian looked at me. There is something else you need to know. The audit clause was not written last week. Rose added it 18 months ago. 18 months, long before Sophie's pregnancy, long before the divorce papers. Grandma Rose had not been reacting to a family scandal, she had been waiting for one. I reached the home Daniel and I had shared for 9 years. My security code no longer worked, stood on the front steps, still wearing my funeral dress, and entered the number twice. The keypad flashed red. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He got out without looking ashamed. You changed the code? I thought some space would be best. My clothes are inside. I packed the essentials. He opened the trunk and removed 2 suitcases. They were the ones we had taken to Italy for our 10th anniversary 6 months earlier. At the time, Daniel had spent half the trip answering work emergencies. Sophie had called nearly every night. I had believed him. That humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Daniel set the suitcases beside me. You can stay at Rosewood House. You knew she left it to me? His eyes shifted. That was my answer. How long have you known? The family received preliminary estate information. And you served me papers because you thought the divorce would prevent me from inheriting. That isn't what happened. Then explain it. He lowered his voice. Grandmother's trust has a family continuity provision. We believed property transferred to a spouse could be challenged if the marriage was already ending. We? My mother's attorneys. So Celeste planned this. No one planned anything. The marriage has been over for a long time. It had not felt over when he came to my bed 2 weeks ago. It had not felt over when he asked me to attend Rose's funeral at his side. It had not felt over when he let me write the eulogy because he said no one knew his grandmother as well as I did. I wanted to slap him. Instead, I removed my wedding ring. Daniel watched it slide from my finger, For a second, pain crossed his face. That nearly broke me. Then his phone lit up. Sophie calling. He declined it. Too late. I had seen the photograph on the screen. Sophie was lying in our bed, wearing one of my white silk robes. My grief became something cleaner, colder. I need access to the house, I said. My financial records, passport, jewelry, and work files are inside. My attorney advised against unsupervised access. Because you're afraid I'll find something? I'm protecting both of us. You should have thought of that before putting your mistress in my robe. He flinched. I lifted my suitcases. Tomorrow morning, my attorney will contact yours about access. Any property removed, destroyed, or altered after today will be documented. Evelyn, one more thing. I looked through the front window. The vase on the entry table had been moved. Behind it was the small security camera I had installed after a series of neighborhood burglaries. Daniel had forgotten it existed. You should tell Sophie not to touch my things. His expression changed. I walked away before he could ask what I knew. The truth was, I didn't know anything yet, but for the first time, Daniel looked frightened enough to believe I did. Rosewood House had always smelled of cedar, old books, and Grandma Rose's lavender hand cream. That evening, it smelled like absence. Julian met me at the front entrance and handed me a folder containing the deed, insurance documents, and security instructions. Rose changed the locks 2 months ago, he said. Only she and I had keys. And now me. And now you. I looked toward the locked east wing. What did she keep in the archive? She never told me everything. You were her attorney. I prepared the legal documents she wanted prepared. Rose did not always explain where she obtained her information. Julian led me through the library to a narrow hallway covered with family photographs. Daniel at 12, holding a tennis trophy, Celeste at her wedding, Rose standing beside the first Whitmore Hotel. Near the end hung a photograph I had never noticed. Rose was much younger, perhaps 40. Beside her stood a dark-haired woman whose face had been partly damaged by sunlight. The woman wore a silver locket shaped like a bird. I touched the frame. Who is she? Julian paused. I don't know. You looked as though you recognized her. I said I don't know. It was the first lie I had heard him tell. At the end of the hallway stood a walnut door without a visible keyhole. The brass key fit into a small opening hidden beneath the molding. Inside was not the dusty storage room I expected. It was an office. 3 computer monitors occupied one wall. Filing cabinets lined another. A scanner, printer, and locked document safe sat beneath a framed quotation. The dead don't sign checks. Rose used to say that whenever someone blamed an accounting mistake on an employee who had already left the company. Ran my fingers over the brass plate. Was she conducting her own audit? Julian opened a desk drawer. Inside were dozens of red envelopes. Each was labeled with a date and a name. Daniel. Celeste. Sophie. Mine. My throat tightened. There's one for me? Julian did not touch it. Rose instructed that you choose the order. I picked up the envelope labeled with my name. The wax seal showed Rose's initials. Inside was a single handwritten note. Evelyn, trust the numbers before you trust anyone. Start with the $6 million lie. Beneath the note was a bank routing number. I recognized the first 4 digits. It belonged to Whitmore Hospitality's operating account. The last 4 digits belonged to an account I had never seen. Had spent most of my career following money people believed could not be followed. Before marrying Daniel, I worked in forensic accounting. I specialized in corporate fraud, hidden transfers, and financial statements designed to look harmless. Daniel once said my mind was the reason he fell in love with me. Apparently, it had also become the reason he needed me outside his company. Entered the routing information into Rose's computer. The system asked for a password. Tried Rose's birthday. Rejected. The hotel's founding date. Rejected. Then I looked at the framed quotation. The dead don't sign checks. I typed it without spaces. The screen opened. A spreadsheet appeared with hundreds of transactions. The total at the bottom was $6,240,000. Money had been transferred in small amounts over 18 months. Most payments appeared to be vendor expenses, renovation consultants, digital marketing firms, temporary staffing agencies, but I recognized 3 company names. They were faked. I had rejected them during my final year as CFO because they had no employees. no verifiable offices, and no history. After I resigned, Daniel approved them. The money had flowed from Whitmore Hospitality into a holding company called Lantern Shore Capital. Searched the state registration database. Lantern Shore's authorized representative was Sophie Lane. My hands began to shake, not because Daniel was sleeping with her, because he had stolen more than $6 million and placed it under her control. A folder on the desktop contained scanned approval forms. Each carried my electronic signature. I had not signed them. Julian, I called. He stepped into the room. Did Rose believe Daniel forged these? She believed your credentials had been used without authorization. Why didn't she report it? She wanted proof of who controlled the final account. Money moved through 3 intermediaries. Until recently, she could not identify the beneficiary. Sophie. Possibly. Her name is on the company registration. Names on registrations are not always the people controlling the money. I opened another file. It contained a transfer scheduled for the coming Friday. $2 million. The destination was a private bank in the Cayman Islands. Approval required 2 signatures. Daniel's and mine. My forged signature was already attached. He's going to finish emptying the account, I said. Julian looked at the date. Unless the board stops him. I control Rose's voting rights. For now. I looked at him. What does that mean? Daniel filed an emergency petition challenging the red envelope clause an hour after the funeral. The speed of it chilled me. He had the petition prepared in advance. Yes. So he knew the envelope might exist. Julian nodded slowly. He knew Rose had created a contingency. He just didn't know what would trigger it. I stared at the divorce papers lying on the desk. Daniel had believed serving me would remove me from the estate. Instead, he had triggered the one clause designed to expose him. The next morning, Daniel's attorney sent me a formal demand, was to surrender all company documents and refrain from contacting board members until the court ruled on the validity of Rose's voting transfer. Attached was an affidavit from Daniel. He claimed Grandma Rose had become irrational during her final months. He claimed I had isolated her from the family. He claimed I had manipulated a dying woman into transferring control of the company to me. At the bottom was a supporting statement from Sophie. She described me as emotionally unstable and obsessed with maintaining access to the Whitmore fortune. I read it twice, then I laughed, not because it was funny, because Sophie had made a mistake. Her affidavit listed her current address. It was an apartment overlooking Central Park, leased by Lantern Shore Capital. I searched Rose's files and found monthly payments for the apartment, a luxury car, private medical insurance, and a renovation company that had installed a nursery. Daniel had not only funded his mistress with stolen company money, he had created an entire second household. A photograph slipped from one of the folders. It was an ultrasound image. Across the top were Sophie's name and the date of the examination. Across the bottom was an estimated gestational age. 17 weeks. I counted backward. Sophie had conceived in late March. Daniel and I had spent the final 2 weeks of March at a remote wellness center in Arizona, trying to repair our marriage. Phones were surrendered at check-in. Guests were not permitted to leave without signing out. Daniel had been beside me every night. Maybe Sophie's dates were slightly wrong. Maybe the clinic's estimate was approximate. Maybe Daniel had met her immediately before or after the trip. Then I saw the patient identification number. It began with ECW.my initials. Evelyn Carter Whitmore. I logged into my old insurance portal. A reproductive health claim had been submitted under my policy in February. The clinic was called North Star Fertility. The procedure was listed only as cryogenic material transfer and storage. I had never been a patient there. My phone rang. It was Celeste. You need to stop digging, she said without greeting. How did Sophie use my insurance? Silence. Then Celeste said, you have no idea what you're interfering with. My identity was used at a fertility clinic. Some administrative errors are easier to correct quietly. This wasn't an error. If you expose private family medical information, you will regret it. Is Daniel the father of Sophie's baby? Celeste's breathing changed. That child is a Whitmore. It was not an answer. Before I could ask another question, she hung up. Grandma Rose's red envelope labeled Daniel contained a medical report. Did not want to open it. Private medical information should remain private, even when the person involved has betrayed you. But Rose had left it in the archive for a reason. Inside was a consultation from a reproductive specialist dated 11 years earlier. Daniel had undergone cancer treatment as a teenager. I knew that. What I did not know was that the treatment had left him permanently infertile. The report stated that biological conception would be extraordinarily unlikely without preserved genetic material. A second document confirmed that no viable sample had ever been stored. Sat back in the chair. Daniel could not be the biological father of Sophie's child. He knew it, Celeste knew it, and yet they were publicly presenting the pregnancy as the first Whitmore child of its generation. Why? The answer was in Rose's trust. The first verified biological great-grandchild would receive a separate block of family shares held outside the company's ordinary voting structure. Those shares were worth nearly $20 million. Sophie's pregnancy was not simply a reason for Daniel to leave me. It was a financial claim. Someone intended to present her child as Rose's biological heir. The clinic claim under my insurance suddenly made sense. Daniel could not father a child. They needed reproductive material from another Whitmore relative. Using my insurance identity could conceal who had authorized or received the procedure, called North Star Fertility. The records supervisor refused to discuss details over the phone, but when I explained that my identity might have been used fraudulently, her tone changed. Mrs. Whitmore, our system shows you signed a release in person. I did not. The release was witnessed. By whom? I'm not authorized to provide that information without a formal request. I'll have one delivered today. She hesitated. There is something else. The identification scanned into the account matches your driver's license. My wallet was in my purse, but 2 years ago, I had lost my license during a Whitmore charity gala. Daniel had found it the next morning near the ballroom. At least, that was what he told me. Can you tell me the date the license was scanned? She gave it to me, the same day Sophie began working at Whitmore Hospitality. Chapter 8. The woman who borrowed my face. North Star Fertility occupied 3 quiet floors of a private medical building in Manhattan. Arrived with my attorney, Rachel Kim, and a formal identity fraud notice. The clinic administrator met us in a conference room. She placed a copy of the identification scan on the table. It was my license. The woman in the security photograph was not me. But she had tried very hard to look like me. Dark shoulder-length hair, large tortoiseshell glasses. A beige coat identical to one I owned. Her face was turned partly away, but I recognized Sophie's narrow jaw. She used my identity, I said. The administrator looked sick. She presented your identification and insurance information. She signed your name. What procedure did she receive? Rachel raised one hand. Before you answer, we need written confirmation that the clinic is preserving all video, laboratory records, authorization logs, payment information, and witness names. The administrator nodded. The account was used to arrange a frozen embryo transfer. My stomach twisted. Whose embryo? I cannot release genetic source information without additional legal authority. Was it transferred to Sophie Lane? The administrator looked down. Yes. Sophie was pregnant, but the pregnancy had not begun through an affair in the ordinary sense. She was carrying an embryo obtained through North Star Fertility. Who paid for it? Lantern Shore Capital. The stolen money company. Who witnessed the consent? The administrator turned the page. Daniel Whitmore. For a moment, I could not breathe. Daniel had looked at a woman impersonating me and sworn to medical staff that she was his wife. It used my identity to create a child he knew was not biologically his. Rachel's phone buzzed. She read the message and frowned. Evelyn, we have a problem. What? The court granted Daniel temporary control of Rose's shares until the competency challenge is heard. My access to the company had lasted less than 48 hours. Daniel now had enough voting power to approve Friday's $2 million transfer. The administrator gathered the papers. I'm sorry, but our legal department has instructed us not to release anything else until we receive a court order. Who contacted your legal department? She would not answer. She did not need to. Daniel knew I was here. Chapter 9. The photograph in the hallway back at Rosewood House. I studied the old photograph of Grandma Rose and the dark-haired woman wearing the bird-shaped locket. Something about the woman bothered me, not familiarity exactly, more like recognition without memory. Removed the frame from the wall. On the back, Rose had written, Rose and Claire, 1989. Before everything changed. My mother's name had been Claire Carter. She died when I was 6. I had always believed the photograph could have been coincidence. Claire was a common name. Still, the woman's chin resembled mine. So did the slight downward curve at the corner of her mouth. Julian entered the hallway. You lied yesterday, I said. He looked at the photograph. Yes. Who is she? I can't tell you. Can't or won't? Rose required me to remain silent unless a specific condition was met. What condition? He glanced toward the archive, you opening every red envelope she left for you. There are more than 20. Then you should continue. Daniel is about to transfer $2 million out of the company. I know. He has temporary control because you failed to stop his emergency petition. Julian's expression remained unreadable. I presented the documents Rose authorized me to present. You sound like a machine. I sound like an executor following instructions. Did you know Daniel's petition was prepared before the funeral? Yes. Did you know the judge would grant temporary control? I believed it was possible. Anger rose in my chest. Then why didn't you warn me? Because Rose believed Daniel would become careless only if he thought he had one. I stared at him. You allowed him to regain control intentionally. I followed the legal process. Daniel's own filings will force him to produce documents he might otherwise destroy. You're using me as bait. No, Julian's voice softened for the first time. Rose was. He handed me another red envelope. This one was labeled Julian. Inside, Rose had written, he will appear to betray you. Let him. The easiest way to catch a thief is to return the key and watch which door he opens. I looked at Julian. What door are we watching? He nodded toward the company transfer schedule, the Cayman account. Chapter 10. The funeral camera. Whitmore funerals were private, but they were not unrecorded. The family hired a videographer to live stream the service for relatives who could not attend. Rose's envelope labeled funeral contained instructions for obtaining the original recording. Expected it to show Daniel handing me the divorce papers. Instead, it showed Sophie arriving 40 minutes before the ceremony. She was not visibly pregnant when she stepped from her car. Her dress hung straight. 5 minutes later, she entered the funeral home restroom carrying a large leather bag. When she emerged, her stomach had changed shape. A fake belly. My heart pounded. But why fake a pregnancy when clinic records showed she had received an embryo transfer? I moved through the video frame by frame. During the burial, Sophie's stomach appeared firm and high. When she hurried toward the SUV after Julian opened the red envelope, the shape shifted downward. She had worn padding to appear further along than she truly was. The ultrasound estimated 17 weeks. Her actual embryo transfer had occurred only 8 weeks earlier. She was pregnant, but not almost 4 months pregnant. The false timeline was necessary to make the child appear conceived before Grandma Rose altered the final trust provisions. Child conceived afterward could not claim the special share block. Rose had anticipated someone manipulating the timing. That was why her clause required independent verification. I called Rachel. We need the clinic's transfer date and the funeral video preserved. I'll add them to the emergency motion. Not yet. Evelyn, the company transfer happens Friday. I know. Then why wait? Because Daniel believes we only suspect identity fraud. I want to know whose embryo Sophie is carrying. Rachel was silent. That information may be sealed. Then we trace payment records, laboratory codes, and consent witnesses. You think the embryo is connected to the Whitmore family? Celeste said the child was a Whitmore. She did not say it was Daniel's. A notification appeared on Rose's computer. Someone had attempted to access the archive remotely. The login came from Daniel's office. Then a second alert appeared. File deletion in progress. Stared at the screen. Daniel was trying to erase the company's backup records. exactly as Rose expected. Chapter 11. The door he opened. Julian had created a duplicate server environment before the funeral. Daniel did not know that. When he logged into what he believed was the company's live archive, every action was copied into a protected evidence file. He searched for my old approval credentials, opened the Lantern Shore folders, then he deleted 17 vendor contracts and the scheduled Cayman transfer. He thinks he destroyed them, I said. Julian nodded. Every keystroke has been preserved. Why did Rose trust you with this? She did not trust me automatically. She tested me for 30 years. That sounds like her. The corner of his mouth almost lifted. Daniel made one final mistake. He uploaded a replacement board resolution authorizing the Cayman transfer under a different description. International Expansion Consulting.my forged signature appeared again. This time, we had a live record of the document entering the system from Daniel's personal device. Rachel filed an emergency injunction. The transfer was frozen 12 minutes before execution. Daniel called me immediately. You have no authority to interfere with company operations. I have authority to object when someone forges my signature. You approved those vendors while you were CFO. No, I didn't. We have records. You have copies you created. His silence lasted half a second too long, then he changed tactics. Sophie has been hospitalized. For what? Stress-related complications. Your harassment caused it. I have not contacted her. You went to her clinic. I went to a clinic where she used my identity. That was an administrative misunderstanding. She wore a fake pregnancy belly at the funeral. His breathing stopped. I had not planned to reveal that, but sometimes a small truth is useful when you want to hear someone react to a larger one. Who told you that? He asked. The camera did. You're watching funeral footage like a lunatic? No. I'm preserving evidence. She was wearing support padding. To make an 8-week pregnancy look 17 weeks along? He lowered his voice. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it. I don't owe you an explanation. Not to me. To the trust administrator. He hung up. 3 minutes later, the archive alerted me that someone had searched for the funeral footage. Daniel had confirmed the evidence mattered. Chapter 12. The missing donor. North Star Fertility's laboratory codes did not identify a person directly, they identified a storage facility. The embryo transferred to Sophie had been shipped from a private reproductive bank in Connecticut. Rachel obtained a court order requiring the clinic to preserve its chain of custody records. We still could not access the genetic donor names, but we learned something stranger. The embryo had been stored for 27 years. T had been created long before Daniel met Sophie, long before Daniel met me. The original account holder was listed only as R.W. Rose Whitmore, and my first assumption was that Grandma Rose had preserved an embryo for one of her children, but Rose was already in her 50s 27 years ago. The embryo could not have been intended for her. Another red envelope contained a letter from Rose to North Star's predecessor clinic. She requested annual storage renewals for the remaining material belonging to Claire. Claire, the woman in the photograph. My mother. I read the sentence until the words blurred. The embryo Sophie carried was connected to my mother, possibly created from my mother's egg. Possibly my full or half sibling. I called Julian into the archive. Was Claire Carter my mother? Yes. You knew her? Yes. How did Rose know her? Julian sat across from me. Claire worked for Whitmore Hospitality. She was a junior accountant when Rose discovered evidence that senior executives were stealing from the company. Which executives? Rose's husband. And their son. Daniel's grandfather and father. My mother had uncovered financial crimes inside the Whitmore family. What happened to her? She disappeared before she could testify. My father told me she died in a car accident. There was a car accident. No body was recovered. The room seemed to contract around me. Why would Rose store her embryo? I don't know all the circumstances. You keep saying that. Because Rose divided the truth among several records. She feared one person possessing everything. Daniel used my mother's embryo. It appears so. Did he know whose it was? Julian hesitated. That is the question Rose wanted you to answer. The archive computer chimed. A new email had arrived from an unknown address. The subject line read, "Ask Sophie who the father was supposed to be." A Chapter 13 Sophie's bargain. Sophie agreed to meet me at a private lounge in the hospital. She was not hospitalized. She had rented a patient suite for 3 hours to create billing records and photographs supporting Daniel's harassment claim. When I entered, she was sitting beside the window in designer pajamas. Her fake belly was gone, her real pregnancy was barely visible. "You look disappointed," she said. "I'm relieved you're not in medical danger." "That's very gracious." "No. It's practical. A healthy witness can answer more questions." Her smile faded. I placed a copy of the clinic security image on the table. "You impersonated me." Daniel said the account was being transferred. He lied. He said the clinic made an error with the old identification. "You wore my coat and glasses." She looked toward the door. "Are you recording this? Would that change your answer?" "Yes." "Then assume I am." Sophie stood. "I don't have to speak to you." "No. But Daniel is blaming the entire scheme on you." That stopped her. He wouldn't. He told his attorney Lantern Shore Capital was managed solely by you. The company registration supports his claim. Her face lost color. He created Lantern Shore. In your name. He said it was for our future. It received more than $6 million in stolen company funds. I didn't know it was stolen. You approved payments for your apartment, car, clinic expenses, and personal accounts. He told me it was his inheritance. Grandma Rose was still alive. Sophie lowered herself into the chair. He said the family had agreed. Agreed to what? Her eyes filled with anger, not guilt, fear. The child was supposed to secure the shares. Daniel couldn't have children, but the trust only required Whitmore blood. Celeste found an old family embryo. My mother's embryo. Sophie stared at me. He didn't tell me that. Whose sperm created it? I don't know. Then how did they know it carried Whitmore blood? Celeste said Rose had arranged it for Daniel's father years ago. That doesn't make sense. I only know what they told me. Who was the child supposed to belong to legally? Daniel and me. And after you received the trust shares? Her mouth tightened. We were going to marry. Were you? I slid a second document across the table. It was the divorce settlement Daniel had offered me. The proposed beneficiary for his estate remained Celeste, not Sophie or her child. Sophie read the page twice, then she whispered, "He said everything would go to the baby. He lied to both of us." Her phone buzzed. Daniel's name appeared. She declined the call. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "The truth." You don't want truth. You want revenge. I want my identity back. My money back. My company protected. And whoever created this scheme held accountable. Sophie looked at the clinic photograph, then she said, "Daniel keeps a second phone in the safe behind your bedroom wall." I had lived in that room for 9 years. I had never known there was a safe. Chapter 14. The safe behind my bedroom. A court order gave me 2 supervised hours inside my former home. Daniel's attorney attended to so did a security officer and a locksmith hired by Rachel. The hidden safe was behind a framed photograph from our wedding that felt almost insulting in its perfection. Daniel's attorney objected when the locksmith removed the frame. This exceeds the property access agreement. Rachel held up Sophie's sworn statement. We have reason to believe marital and corporate records are being concealed. The safe opened after 20 minutes. Inside were 2 phones, 3 passports, Grandma Rose's ruby necklace, and a stack of unsigned documents. 1 passport belonged to Daniel. 1 belonged to Sophie. The third belonged to me. My missing passport had reported it lost 8 months earlier after Daniel claimed the hotel in Rome must have misplaced it. The passport had been used twice since then. Once to open the Lantern Shore Cayman account. Once to verify a private medical shipment from Connecticut. Daniel had used my identity internationally as well as medically. The second phone contained messages between Daniel, Sophie, and Celeste. Most had been deleted, but the device synchronized automatically with a smartwatch. Sophie's smartwatch. A message from Daniel read, "Once Grandma dies, we serve Evelyn immediately. The family clause will invalidate her gift." Celeste replied, "Do it before Julian reads the will. Publicly, if necessary. She signs when she's humiliated," Sophie added, "and the pregnancy," Daniel answered, "were the larger belly. Everyone needs to believe the timing." There it was, the funeral had been a performance. The divorce papers were not merely cruelty, they were pressure. They wanted me grieving, publicly humiliated, and desperate enough to sign a settlement containing a waiver of all estate rights. The final message was from Sophie. "What happens when the child is tested?" Daniel replied, "It will pass." Mother handled the donor. Celeste had not found a random embryo. She knew exactly whose child Sophie carried. Before we could copy the entire device, the screen went black. The phone had been remotely erased. Daniel's attorney smiled. "I suppose that ends your fishing expedition." Rachel looked at me. Our most direct evidence appeared gone. Then I remembered Rose's note, "Trust the numbers before you trust anyone." The smartwatch synchronization log had displayed a cloud account identifier, had memorized the last 6 digits. Chapter 15. The apparent betrayal. Julian refused to help recover the cloud data. "We need to proceed through formal discovery," he said. "By then, Daniel will delete everything. He already has. The watch data may still exist. Accessing it without authorization could damage your case." I stared at him across Rose's desk. "You returned company control to Daniel. You let him delete files. Now you're refusing to preserve evidence. I am advising caution. You're protecting the estate." "I am. Not me." No, the honesty hurt more than I expected. Had begun to believe Julian was on my side. Perhaps that had been foolish. Handed me a court filing. Daniel was seeking a protective order preventing me from publicly discussing Sophie's pregnancy, the clinic, or the company audit. His petition included a sworn statement from Julian. Read the first paragraph. Julian confirmed that Rose had become physically weak and increasingly suspicious during her final months. "You signed this?" "Yes." "You gave Daniel evidence for his competency challenge." "I answered the questions I was legally required to answer." "You also wrote that she relied heavily on me." "She did." "It makes it sound as though I influenced her." "That interpretation belongs to the court." I threw the document onto the desk. "Get out. This is Rose's archive." And Rose left the house to me. Julian stood at the doorway. He paused, opened the red envelope labeled March 17th. Then he left. I found the envelope near the bottom of the drawer. Inside was no note, only a receipt for repairing an antique watch. The repair shop's name was printed across the top. "Second-hands restoration." The back, Rose had written, "Some things appear broken because the visible hands have stopped. The mechanism underneath may still be running." Looked at the erased phone, then at the red envelope itself. One edge of the paper seemed thicker than the others. Flit a letter opener beneath the fold. A tiny memory card fell onto the desk. Rose had hidden a backup inside the envelope. Chapter 16. Rose's final recording. The memory card contained 3 audio files. The first was recorded 11 months before Rose's death. Daniel's voice came through clearly. "We don't need the original donor records. We only need proof of Whitmore lineage." Celeste replied, "The material is Claire's. That is enough." Claire wasn't a Whitmore. Not by name. A chair scraped, then Sophie spoke. "What does that mean?" Celeste's response was almost too quiet to hear. "It means Evelyn's mother was carrying my husband's child when she disappeared." I stopped the recording. Daniel's father, Richard Whitmore, had died 5 years earlier, according to Celeste. My mother's embryo had been created using Richard's sperm. The child Sophie carried was biologically related to Daniel, but not as his son or daughter. As his half-sibling. That was how the baby could satisfy the Whitmore blood requirement. It was grotesque. Daniel planned to present his own unborn half-sibling as his child to claim the great-grandchild trust. Played the second file. Sophie was crying. "You said this was legal." Daniel answered, "It becomes legal when the child is born and I sign the acknowledgement." But Evelyn's identity, she'll be gone before anyone investigates. Gone where? Out of the family. Don't be dramatic. The third recording was Grandma Rose alone. Her voice was faint. Evelyn, if you are hearing this, they have done exactly what I feared. She coughed. Your mother discovered that Richard and his father were stealing from the company. Richard convinced her he loved her. When she became pregnant, she believed they would leave together. Rose paused for a long time. He betrayed her. Celeste helped him conceal the affair. The accident that followed was never properly investigated. My hands went cold. I preserved the remaining embryo because it was the only proof that Claire and Richard had created a life together. I never imagined anyone would use it this way. Her voice broke. I could not save your mother. I can still give you the chance to save yourself. The recording ended. A moment later, another file appeared, not audio. A scheduled email draft addressed to a federal financial crimes investigator. Grandma Rose had prepared the evidence, but she had never sent it. The final instruction read, Evelyn decides whether the Whitmore name survives. Chapter 17. The courtroom lost. Daniel's competency challenge was heard behind closed doors. His attorneys presented photographs of Grandma Rose in a wheelchair, medical records showing pain medication, and Julian's statement that she had become suspicious. They argued that I had exploited her distrust. Sophie appeared by video from her hospital suite, one hand resting gently over her real stomach. She cried as she described my supposed harassment. Daniel sat beside his mother. He never looked at me. Rachel presented the forged signatures, the clinic identity theft, and the funeral footage. The judge found the evidence troubling, but ruled that the estate dispute required a full hearing. Until then, Daniel retained temporary control of Rose's shares. Worse, the judge granted a limited protective order barring both sides from disclosing private fertility information outside the courtroom. Reporters waited. Daniel's public relations team had already released a statement. It accused me of attacking a pregnant woman and exploiting Grandma Rose's death to seize control of the family company. For the first time, I understood how easily a lie could become public truth. Daniel approached while cameras filmed. I'm sorry it came to this, he said loudly. He looked compassionate, almost admired the performance. You didn't need to humiliate Sophie, he continued. She's already under enormous stress. The reporters leaned closer. I said nothing. Daniel lowered his voice so only I could hear. You've lost. Take the settlement before I reduce it. I haven't lost. The board votes tomorrow. Once I remove the remaining audit committee, your records won't matter. You forged my signature. You can't prove I did it. I found my passport in your safe. His smile faltered. Marital property. You used it to open an offshore account. You should be careful what you accuse people of. So should you. He turned toward the cameras, walked down the courthouse steps alone while strangers shouted questions about my mental health, my marriage, and Sophie's unborn baby. That night, Whitmore Hospitality's board suspended me from all advisory roles. 3 longtime colleagues issued statements supporting Daniel. The MY Bank notified me that our joint accounts had been frozen. MY attorney warned that recovering the cloud recordings might take months. For several hours, I sat on the floor of Rosewood House and allowed myself to break. I cried for my marriage, for Grandma Rose, for my mother, for the woman I had been before the funeral, still believing love could survive anything if I worked hard enough. Then the doorbell rang. Sophie stood outside. She was bleeding. Chapter 18. The woman at my door. I drove Sophie to the nearest emergency room. Whatever she had done, the baby had done nothing. The doctors determined that she was experiencing a complication that required observation but was not immediately life-threatening. Daniel did not answer her calls, neither did Celeste. Stayed until the doctor said she was stable. Sophie stared at the ceiling. He told me you wanted the baby dead. I don't. He said you'd destroy all of us if you learned the truth. I want the adults responsible to face consequences. She turned toward me. Do you hate me? Yes. The answer surprised her. I hate what you did, I continued. I hate that you slept with my husband, wore my clothes, used my identity, and stood at Rose's grave pretending to carry Daniel's child. But hatred doesn't require me to become cruel. Tears slid into her hair. I thought he loved me. So did I. She gave a bitter laugh. He said you were cold. That you cared more about spreadsheets than people. He used to say my mind was what he loved most. He told me the same thing about my ambition. Daniel did not love qualities, he loved reflections of himself. Sophie reached for her handbag. Inside was the smartwatch paired with Daniel's erased phone. I took it before I left the house. My pulse quickened. Is the data still there? The local recordings are. I turned off the connection before Daniel erased the phone. Why didn't you give it to me earlier? I wanted him to choose me. And now? He chose his mother. She handed me the watch. There's a recording from the night before the funeral. I didn't know it was running. What's on it? Daniel and Celeste discussing what happens after the baby is born. I looked at her. Sophie's face crumpled. They planned to take custody from me. The alliance had broken exactly where greed always breaks. At ownership. Chapter 19. The custody plan. The recording began with Celeste pouring a drink. Then Daniel said, once the trust recognizes the child, Sophie becomes unnecessary. My stomach turned. Celeste replied. She signed the surrogacy acknowledgement. Sophie's voice entered faintly from another room. She thinks it was a clinic consent form, Daniel said. And Evelyn? She signs the divorce waiver at the funeral. If she refuses, we discredit her. What if Rose's executor opens the contingency? He won't. The divorce happens before the will reading. You're too confident. I know Evelyn. Public humiliation shuts her down. That sentence hurt because it had once been true, had spent years smoothing Daniel's mistakes, hiding my anger, and avoiding scenes that might embarrass the family, had mistaken self-control for weakness. Celeste continued, after the birth, Sophie will be declared medically unstable. The child remains with you. And the embryo records? Destroyed. What about Evelyn's identity? Once she is divorced, any accusations will look vindictive. The recording ended with Daniel laughing. Sophie covered her face. They planned everything. Yes. They were going to take my baby. Yes. What happens now? That depends on whether you tell the truth publicly and under oath. If I do, I could be charged. I can't promise immunity. She looked at me. You could use the recording without me. Daniel's attorneys will claim it was edited. Your testimony explains the context. And if I help you? I will tell the truth about your cooperation. Nothing more. She nodded slowly. It was not forgiveness. It was an agreement between two women who had finally understood that the same man had built different cages for each of us. Rachel filed an emergency motion to preserve the smartwatch and the hospital's records, also notified federal investigators about the offshore transfers. The next morning, the Whitmore board gathered for Daniel's vote to dismantle the audit committee, believed I could not speak about the embryo, he believed Sophie was still under his control, he believed Julian had sided with him, believed the red envelope had already revealed its greatest secret, was wrong on every count. Chapter 20. The board meeting. Whitmore Hospitality's headquarters occupied the top floors of a glass tower on Park Avenue, had selected the building, negotiated the lease, and designed the financial controls Daniel later dismantled. Security attempted to stop me in the lobby. Julian arrived behind me. Mrs. Whitmore is the designated representative of Rose Whitmore's estate, he said. The court gave Mr. Whitmore temporary control, the guard replied. Temporary voting control. Not ownership. She has a legal right to attend. Daniel was already speaking when we entered the boardroom. Stopped mid-sentence. Celeste sat to his right. 3 board members who had publicly supported him avoided my eyes. Fee's chair was empty. Daniel recovered quickly. This meeting concerns internal governance. Evelyn has no role here. Julian placed a sealed document on the table. She does now. Daniel stared at it. What is that? A federal preservation notice relating to suspected wire fraud, identity theft, falsified corporate approvals, and an attempted offshore transfer. The room erupted. Daniel stood. This is harassment. No, I said. It is an investigation. You violated the court's protective order. I have not disclosed private genetic information. You went to the government with stolen records. The records concern company funds. Celeste leaned toward Daniel, end the meeting. He ignored her. You have no evidence that I authorized the transfers. A screen illuminated behind me. Julian displayed the server log showing Daniel uploading the forged resolution from his personal device. Daniel's face changed. That log was manufactured. Then you'll welcome an independent examination. The board's general counsel spoke. Daniel, did you authorize a $2 million transfer to Lantern Shore Capital? It was a legitimate vendor. Sophie Lane owns it. She manages it administratively. The boardroom doors opened. Sophie walked in. Her face was pale, but her steps were steady. No, she said. Daniel created it. He put it in my name so I would take the blame. Daniel stared at her. What are you doing? Sophie placed her smartwatch on the table. Choosing myself. Chapter 21. The first reversal. The board listened to the recording in silence. Daniel's voice filled the room, discussing the divorce waiver, the funeral, and the plan to discredit me. When the part about removing Sophie after the baby's birth played, she closed her eyes. Celeste remained perfectly still. Daniel did not. He paced. He interrupted. Accused Sophie of editing the audio. Accused me of coercing her. Accused Julian of conspiring against the family. Each accusation made him appear less credible. The board's general counsel asked one question. Did you serve Evelyn divorce papers during Rose Whitmore's funeral because you believed it would invalidate her inheritance? Daniel looked around the table. No one rescued him. My marriage had ended. That was not my question. My personal life is irrelevant. It became relevant when you used company funds to finance another household and a medical procedure connected to the estate. The room went silent again. Daniel turned toward me. You can't discuss that. I haven't. He realized his mistake too late. Why objecting? He had confirmed the company funds were linked to the protected medical matter. The board voted to place Daniel on administrative leave pending investigation. Celeste protested that Rose's voting shares still belonged under Daniel's temporary control. Julian opened his briefcase. The court order grants Daniel temporary control unless a regulatory investigation creates a conflict with his fiduciary duties. He placed another document on the table. That condition has now occurred. Voting control reverted to the estate's neutral custodian, not to me, but no longer to Daniel. For the first time, his family name could not protect him. Security escorted him from the room. As he passed me, he whispered, "You think this is victory?" No, I looked toward Sophie. This is only the part where you stop controlling the evidence. Daniel smiled. My mother still controls the trust documents. Celeste's head snapped toward him. It was the first visible crack between them. Had revealed something she wanted hidden. Chapter 22. Celeste's private trust. Grandma Rose's main estate was only part of the Whitmore fortune. Celeste administered a private family trust created by her late husband, Richard. The trust held the special shares intended for the first biological great-grandchild. Daniel's statement suggested Celeste had altered those documents. Rose's envelope labeled Celeste contained copies of the original trust agreement and a later amendment. The amendment had supposedly been signed by Richard 3 days after his death. The date was impossible. The dead don't sign checks. They also did not sign trust amendments. Celeste had forged her husband's signature to change the definition of descendant. The original document required a child born to a legally recognized descendant of Rose. The altered version allowed any child carrying verified Whitmore genetic material to qualify if accepted by the trustee. Celeste had rewritten the trust so she could recognize Sophie's baby as Daniel's heir. She had planned the embryo scheme years earlier. But why? Daniel already expected to inherit significant wealth. The answer appeared in Richard's financial records. Before his death, he had secretly borrowed against nearly all his trust assets. If the special share block remained unclaimed for another generation, it would revert to Rose's charitable foundation. Celeste needed a biological child quickly to keep control of the shares. Daniel's infertility made that impossible. So she had used the one preserved embryo containing Richard's DNA. My mother's embryo. The child Sophie carried was not only Daniel's half-sibling, The baby was the last genetic proof of Celeste's husband's affair. Celeste was willing to bring that child into the world, call it her grandchild, and steal its inheritance, all to preserve wealth and bury scandal. I sent the forged amendment to the estate court and federal investigators. Then Celeste called. "Meet me alone," she said. "No, I know what happened to your mother." Every part of me went still aware. Rosewood House. Midnight. You no longer have access. You'll let me in. Why? Because Claire survived the accident. Chapter 23. Midnight at Rosewood. Celeste arrived without a coat despite the cold. She looked older than she had at the funeral, not weaker, more exposed. I allowed her into the library. Rachel and Julian waited in the archive with the audio system recording. Celeste did not know they were there. "Where is my mother?" I asked. "I don't know." "You said she survived." "She did." "How do you know?" "Richard received a letter from her 6 months after the accident." "Where is it?" "He destroyed it." "Convenient." Celeste's gaze moved toward the hallway photograph. Claire threatened to expose everything. The embezzlement. The affair. The pregnancy. Was the accident deliberate? I didn't cause it. That wasn't my question. Richard arranged for someone to frighten her, force her off the road, and recover the company files. My nails dug into my palms. He tried to kill her. He said no one was supposed to be hurt. And you believed him? I believed what I needed to believe. Those words explained Celeste's entire life. What did the letter say? That Claire had lost the pregnancy but survived. She warned Richard never to search for her or you. Why did my father tell me she died? The man who raised you was not your biological father. He was Claire's cousin. He protected you. I thought of the quiet man who had raised me, packed my lunches, attended school plays, and died when I was 22. He had never treated me as anything but his daughter. Why tell me now? Because you need to stop the investigation. I almost laughed. You think this will make me protect you? I think you'll understand that some truths destroy innocent people. You forged documents, stole my identity, and placed my mother's embryo in another woman. I preserved the family. You preserved control. Celeste's composure cracked. If the trust collapses, thousands of employees could lose everything. No. You could lose everything. She leaned closer. Withdraw the evidence, and I'll give you the last address Claire used. Give it to me now. After you sign. She placed a settlement agreement on the table. The same tactic. A grieving woman. A shocking revelation. A signature demanded before she could think. Looked at Celeste and finally understood why Grandma Rose had chosen the funeral as the trigger. The Whitmores always used grief as leverage. I pushed the agreement back. You taught Daniel everything except how to recognize when the woman across from him is no longer afraid. The archive door opened. Julian stepped out. Celeste's face collapsed. He held up a recorder. We have enough. Chapter 24. The child's true place. The estate court ordered an expedited review of the trust amendment. Forensic document examiners confirmed that Richard's signature had been copied from an older property agreement. Celeste was removed as trustee. The original descendant provision was restored. Sophie's baby could not inherit as Daniel's child because the embryo's genetic relationship did not match the claimed lineage, but the child still had rights. Legally, the case was complicated. Biologically, the baby was Richard and Claire's child. That made the baby Rose's grandchild, Daniel's half-sibling, and possibly an heir under other portions of the estate. Sophie sat across from me in Rachel's office. What happens to my baby? Your baby remains yours, Rachel said. The documents you signed were deceptive and do not create an enforceable surrogacy arrangement. And the inheritance? That will be decided after birth and independent testing. But Daniel cannot claim the child as his own for the purpose of receiving the great-grandchild shares. Sophie looked at me. You could challenge my parental rights. I could create years of litigation, I said. I won't. Why? Because the child has already been treated like property by enough people. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve kindness. This isn't kindness. It's a boundary. You will testify truthfully. You will return every dollar and asset purchased with stolen company funds. You will accept the legal consequences of using my identity. And you won't try to take the baby? No, she nodded. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth very little today. She flinched. Maybe someday it will be worth more. That depends on what you do next. Outside the office, Daniel waited near the elevators, his expensive suit hung loosely now. Sophie, he called. She walked past him. He looked at me. You turned her against me. No. You told her exactly what you planned to do. All I did was let her listen. I was angry when I said those things. You were strategic. I loved you. Perhaps. But never more than you loved being protected. His eyes hardened. This company is mine. No, Daniel. That was the first lie your family taught you. Chapter 25. The funeral broadcast. Grandma Rose's memorial gala had been scheduled months before her death. She wanted the event to raise money for employees facing medical hardship. Daniel's public relations team originally planned to use it as his return to leadership. Instead, the board converted it into a formal announcement of the forensic audit results. Hundreds of employees, investors, and journalists filled the ballroom of the original Whitmore Hotel, the same ballroom where my driver's license had disappeared years earlier. Daniel attended under advice from his attorneys. Celeste came because she believed absence would look like guilt. Sophie stayed away, stood backstage holding the red envelope from the funeral. Julian had placed the original documents inside it again. You don't have to speak, he said. Yes, I do. You've already won the board vote. This isn't only about the board. The event opened with Grandma Rose's photograph on the screen, then the funeral video played. The audience saw Daniel hand me the divorce papers beside Rose's grave. They saw Sophie arrive without a visible pregnancy and emerge from the restroom wearing a false belly. They saw Julian open the red envelope. I walked onto the stage. My husband's family believed serving me divorce papers at a funeral would make me too ashamed and heartbroken to ask questions. Daniel stared straight ahead. They believed I would sign away my rights before the executor read Grandma Rose's instructions. I held up the envelope, but Rose knew them better than they knew her. The screen displayed the $6 million transfer trail, then the forged approvals, then my passport recovered from Daniel's safe, then the clinic security photograph showing Sophie impersonating me. It did not reveal private genetic details. Instead, Julian explained that independent medical and legal reviews had disproved the lineage claim used to seek trust assets. The board announced that Daniel had been terminated for cause. Celeste had been removed from every trust and foundation position. Lantern Shore's remaining assets were frozen for recovery. The ballroom remained silent until the Employee Relief Fund director announced that Rose's recovered shares would endow medical coverage for hourly workers. Then the applause began. It did not feel like revenge. It felt like oxygen. Chapter 26. Daniel's last performance. Daniel found me in the hotel's service corridor after the gala. He looked furious, not broken. Men like Daniel rarely broke when exposed. They became offended that reality had refused to cooperate. You made private family matters into entertainment. You served me divorce papers in front of a live stream camera. I didn't know the service was being recorded. That doesn't make it private. You destroyed my mother. Your mother forged a dead man's signature. She was trying to protect the company. She stole from it. So did grandfather. So did my father. The company survived. There it was, his real morality. A crime became acceptable once enough generations committed it. You could have handled this quietly, he said. You mean I could have accepted the settlement? I offered you security. You offered me one house and $3 million in exchange for silence while you kept a company worth hundreds of millions. You never cared about the money. I cared about the truth. He laughed bitterly. No one cares about truth. They care about who tells the best story first. That's why you chose the funeral. His expression tightened. You always had to be the smartest person in the room. No. I only had to be smarter than the people forging my name. He stepped closer. What happens when Sophie's child is born and the court recognizes it as an heir? You think the family will accept you controlling everything? I don't want to control everything. Then what do you want? The answer came easily: my life without you in it. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid, not because he was losing the company, because he was losing his place at the center of my emotions. I can change, he said, I believe you. Hope flickered across his face, into someone else's problem. I walked away, he did not follow. Chapter 27. The divorce hearing. Daniel fought the divorce settlement for 6 months, argued that the company investigation had unfairly influenced the marriage case. He claimed Lantern Shore funds were business investments. He claimed my passport had been stored for safekeeping. He claimed Sophie had acted independently at the clinic. Then Sophie testified. She described the affair, the false pregnancy timeline, the funeral plan, and the promises Daniel made. She admitted her own role without minimizing it. The judge referred portions of her testimony to prosecutors but credited her cooperation. The financial examination found that Daniel had hidden marital assets, used company money for personal expenses, and forged my signature. His settlement offer disappeared. The court awarded me my separate property, half of the remaining marital assets, legal fees, and damages connected to the misuse of my identity. Rosewood House had never been marital property. It remained mine. Daniel retained no interest in Grandma Rose's estate. After the hearing, he sat alone outside the courtroom. Celeste did not attend. She was facing separate charges involving trust fraud and document forgery. Sophie had relocated under medical supervision and entered a cooperation agreement. The Whitmore family, once united in protecting its name, had dissolved into attorneys blaming one another. Daniel looked up as I passed. Was any of it real? He asked. What? Our marriage. Yes. That seemed to hurt him more than denial would have. I loved you, I said. I trusted you. I built a life with you. Those things were real because I was real. And me? You'll have to answer that yourself. He looked down at his hands. I don't know who I am without the company. Then perhaps losing it is the first honest opportunity you've ever had. I left him there, outside. The air was cold and bright. For the first time in months, no reporters were waiting, no one demanded a statement, no one handed me papers. Stood on the courthouse steps and listened to the ordinary sounds of the city. Cars' footsteps. A distant siren. Life continuing without permission from the Whitmores. Chapter 28. What Rose left behind. The board asked me to return as permanent chief executive. I declined. Then I negotiated. I would serve for 2 years, complete the financial restructuring, rebuild the compliance department, and prepare an independent successor. Family member would inherit an executive position without qualifications. Trust would control employee pensions. Individual would be able to approve vendor payments without independent review. The board agreed. Under my leadership, Whitmore Hospitality recovered most of the stolen money. Lantern Shore's apartment was sold. The luxury car was returned. The Cayman transfer never occurred. Several executives who had enabled Daniel resigned before they could be dismissed. The employee medical fund created in Rose's name became the company's most popular program. Sophie gave birth to a healthy girl. She named her Claire Rose Lane. Genetic testing confirmed the baby had been created from my mother's preserved embryo and Richard Whitmore's genetic material. The court recognized Claire Rose as Richard's biological daughter. She inherited a limited portion of his personal estate, protected in a trust that neither Sophie nor any Whitmore relative could control. Did not become her mother. Sophie did not become my friend, but I visited once. The baby slept against Sophie's chest, one tiny fist curled near her cheek. She has your mother's eyes, Sophie said. I don't remember my mother's eyes. Sophie looked down. Maybe someday she can know about her. She should. When she's old enough to understand. Before leaving, I placed a copy of Grandma Rose's final letter in a sealed box for Claire Rose. Not the financial records, not the scandal, only the part where Rose said every child deserved to be treated as a person, not a claim. As I walked out of the hospital, I realized the Whitmore cycle had ended in the least expected way, not through punishment, through refusing to pass ownership of pain to the next generation. Chapter 29. The last red envelope. A year after the funeral, Julian came to Rosewood House carrying a small locked case. the estate is officially settled, he said, and one condition has now been satisfied. He placed the case on Rose's desk. What condition? Daniel's divorce from you became final. The trust amendment was invalidated. The financial investigation produced criminal referrals. And Claire Rose's identity was legally confirmed. He opened the case. Inside was one final red envelope. My full name was written across the front in Grandma Rose's handwriting. Evelyn Claire Carter. My middle name had never appeared on legal documents. My father told me I had none. Why did Rose write Claire? Open it. The envelope contained a recent photograph, not from 1989. A gray-haired woman stood outside a small bookstore somewhere near the ocean. Around her neck was the silver bird locket from the hallway photograph. My hands began to tremble. Where was this taken? Maine. When? 4 months before Rose died. I stared at Julian. You said you didn't know where my mother was. I didn't. Rose received the photograph without a return address. A note was tucked behind it. The handwriting was not Rose's. You kept Evelyn safe. I kept my promise. Do not look for me until Richard's files are public. Richard's files were now public. The financial investigation had released them 2 weeks earlier. Claire is alive, I whispered. We don't know that with certainty. The photograph could have been sent by someone else. It could have been taken years earlier. I turned it over. A digital print date appeared on the back. The photograph was recent. Below it, Grandma Rose had written one sentence. Evelyn, your mother did not disappear because she was afraid of the Whitmores. She disappeared because someone more powerful was protecting them. Chapter 30. The voice on the recording. Julian and I reviewed every remaining file in Rose's archive. Found no address for Claire, no phone number, no explanation for the bookstore. But we found a recording I had overlooked. It was hidden in the same folder as Grandma Rose's final message. The audio began with Rose speaking to someone over the telephone. I've done what you asked, Rose said. Evelyn will control the shares if Daniel moves against her. A woman answered. Her voice was distorted by distance, but something in it made my skin tighten. You should have told her years ago. I was trying to keep her alive. Silence never kept Claire alive. Then why are you still hiding? The woman did not answer. Rose continued. Richard is dead. His father is dead. Daniel does not know enough to be dangerous. You still think Daniel was the point? A pause followed, then the unidentified woman said, the Whitmores were only holding the money. For whom? The line crackled. Rose whispered a name. The recording cut out before I could understand it. Replayed the final seconds again. On the fourth attempt, I heard a faint sound beneath the static. A train announcement, then a bell. Julian leaned closer. That could help identify the location. My phone vibrated. An email had arrived from an account with no sender name. The message contained only a photograph. T showed me standing outside Rosewood House that morning. The picture had been taken from beyond the front gates. Beneath it were 9 words, your husband was never the real target. You were. A second message appeared before I could respond. Bring the final red envelope to the bookstore alone. I looked toward the window. A dark car was disappearing through the trees, and my hand, Grandma Rose's last envelope, suddenly felt heavier than paper, and somewhere in Maine, a woman wearing my mother's locket was waiting to tell me why an entire family had spent 30 years making sure I never learned who I really was. For more exciting content, please subscribe and follow us.